Hello, friends. Hello. We are back for the next chapters of the Seafoam Inn. If you're listening or watching on YouTube or Spotify, there's a playlist for the audiobook. So if you haven't heard the chapters prior, you can visit the playlist. Anywhere else, you might have to scroll further back in the podcast to find the rest of the audiobook. Without further ado, I bring you The Seafoam Inn by me, TAMI Chambers. This is Chapter 4. Clive Douglas. Now Scratchy knew that Dakar might not approve of using his friend Clive for such a mission, but hey, it wouldn't hurt to try. Scratchy moved stealthily through the town's back streets, hoping that Mr. Meow was not looking out for him. He just didn't have a positive feeling about this. He approached Dakar's back gate and easily cleared the top, priding himself on his fine physique. If anything, he had still kept in shape during his days as a familiar. He ran 12 kilometers every evening, visiting most of Polly's friends' familiars along the way. They had a good catching up about the town's goings-on, and Scratchy could always count on a delicious feast of leftovers being put out for him by these same feline friends. He had a gregarious, playful nature, and all the female familiars about town had their eye on him. But Scratchy still only had eyes for Polly, and that was that. Maybe one day he'd have the courage to open up to her, to show her he wasn't just a suave, debonair cat, but so much more. He was a man in love with his mistress, and he wanted so much to tell her. But not right yet. He had this Mr. Meow thing to take care of first, and then maybe, just maybe, he'd do it, take off his fur, shed his claws, and present himself to her as a man in love. Yeah, maybe one day, soon, he'd do just that. Oh, Polly, he thought, and then he stopped his reverie. Clive Douglas stood waiting for Scratchy at the back porch of Dakar's bungalow. He'd sensed Scratchy coming to him for quite some time now. He stood with his heart wide open, waiting for whatever crazy plan he knew Scratchy was coming to pitch to him. Now, Dakar didn't have just any old familiar, my friends. No top agent of the Bringers of the Light would be caught without a very formidable companion. And Clive Douglas, all 75 pounds of him, was stationed and waiting proudly to assist his best buddy, Scratchy. Clive and Scratchy had met at the Great Starfest 1999 at the Tilt-A-Whirl in town. Scratchy already well into his stint as Polly's familiar, and Clive still considering if he needed to hide from the rogue Galactic Federation after his most recent mission to kidnap and infiltrate those off-planet places that had factions still against the Earth's golden age of upgrades. Clive had run that very scary mission without being incognito and had been recognized as a bringer of the light. They were on to him. And so to protect his status and stay alive, he approached Highcore and asked for reassurance and a new assignment. Highcore had the perfect hiding place and mission, but only if Clive promised that after 25 years he would change back to his mortal human form. Clive agreed, and for the past 24 years had served as Dakar's bodyguard and faithful companion, Clive Douglas, a.k.a. Rocky Houndsworth, a 75-pound German shepherd who could not be beat. He was here now waiting for Scratchy, reporting for duty as a fellow Bringers of the Light familiar. Let's get it on, Clive thought. No black magic wizard cat was going to mess with his friend, his town, his country, or his world. Chapter 5. It's a Mad World. Scratchy and Clive had it all figured out, or so they thought. They would stealthily and carefully enter the Seafoam Inn and interrogate Mr. Meow. They would lure him from Count Mashar's side with a promise and a plate of his favorite pâté. Mr. Meow could not resist lobster pâté, and Rockaway Point, specifically Polly Willikers, made the best lobster pâté this side of County Cork. Scratchy had already filled a travel bowl with the meaty treat, his 10-pound tabbiness dragging the silly bowl along to Clive's. Now the big shepherd could take it on. It was still a ways to the sea foam, and a cat and a dog walking randomly along with a bowl around his neck could draw attention. Best to travel incognito, as Scratchy swished his paw and cloaked them in invisibility. The walk seemed to take hours, although in the invisible world minutes could seem like hours. They arrived at the sea foam, and Scratchy decided to keep the spell on, at least until they got Mr. Meow to the pâté. Clive Douglas did not want to have to go hardball on Meow, but if that darn cat shifted into a dragon again, Clive would be forced to. It was rumored at HQ that Mr. Meow could only shift into dragon form in the winter time. But that had yet to be proven, and being that it was midsummer, Clive figured they were safe. Scratchy moved into the kitchen of the old bed and breakfast. They had easily and magically worked the lock on the old back screen door. He opened the lid on the lobster pâté and used his own secret lion's breath to mystically move the scent of the decadent treat up to wherever the patchwork cat was, probably sharpening his claws and lauding over his master. It wouldn't take long, Scratchy thought, as he and Clive, who was posted at the back door, readied themselves for the confrontation. Chapter 6. Old War Buddies Eat a Snack. The pâté luringly wafted its scent up and under the door of the sea mist suite, and Mr. Meow, just as Scratchy thought, had been sharpening his claws and standing over Count Mashar. He wondered what it was like to be a human, as he had always been a shape-shifting dragon cat. But he decided that human lives and lessons were much too complicated. And then his little patched nose took the scent. The dreamy goodness of lobster pâté. Now, had Mr. Meow not skipped dinner, Tilly O'Malley had offered him some tuna casserole, but it had leeks in it, and he did not like the flavor. If he had, his tummy would have been too full to appreciate the pâté. But he fell for it and discreetly opened the door to the suite. He didn't see anyone, and he surmised and remotely viewed the pâté sitting in a bowl by the back kitchen door. He sniffed the air and only got lobster and the faint tinge of lemon-scented tungsten oil, most likely used to polish all the old wood in the place. Mr. Meow slid down the banister of the winding staircase, applauding himself on his agility. He still had it in him, whatever it really was. He rounded the corner to the kitchen, all the while feeling his mouth water at the taste of the lobster. Was this too easy, friends? How could a veteran bad guy like Mr. Meow be so easily fooled? Well, sometimes the best of us gets beguiled, and later on, all the wiser after the fact, we realize the signs were there all along. Blinded by hunger and the rumble of his tummy, Meow slid into the kitchen and sidled up to the bowl. He lapped at the pâté, little drops of drool puddling on the linoleum floor. Clive eyed Scratchy. Scratchy eyed Clive. The invisibility cloak swished quickly away by Scratchy's paw. Clive used his paw to stomp down on Mr. Meow's back, while Scratchy used his claws to latch onto Meow's collar. He wasn't going anywhere. "Did you miss me?" Clive said into Meow's left ear. "And what about me?" Scratchy said in an equally throaty whisper. Mr. Meow spat out the decadent pâté and whirled around to face Scratchy. True, he couldn't really move in the physical world, but in the energy world he used a number 5 Dragon Ball in the attack position and hurled it straight at Scratchy's aura. Scratchy reeled back, only briefly letting his paw off Meow's collar. But it was enough, Meow thought, to get loose. But the German shepherd's thick paw at the back of his neck bore down on him. Meow threw a mystical minion's power ball at Clive's aura, and the hefty dog felt an etheric punch to the gut. But he didn't flinch, only coughing a little and taking in a deep breath. "Not this time," Clive said. Scratchy looked straight into Meow's eyes. "Who sent you?" he snarled. "And why are you here?" Mr. Meow sent a telepathic message to Count Mashar. "I'm in danger," it screamed, wafting through the ethers and into Mashar's mind. But the Count was too busy with his 5D lady friend, Miss Misty Bountifuls, to notice. What Miss Misty was doing to him cannot be expressed here, for little ears are listening. But suffice it to say that it had Mashar very preoccupied between a rock and a hard place. Mr. Meow was on his own. "You know he can make you talk," Clive said very convincingly. And Meow did recall the last time they'd met, Clive had used some sort of mystic truth serum on him, and he had blurted out all of Count Mashar's deepest secrets, well, except the ones that Mashar had sealed deep inside Mr. Meow's mind with a mind box spell. Those were only coming out if Mashar himself succumbed to the other worlds. Mr. Meow couldn't remember anything about any of those things, and it was meant to stay that way. "I'll tell you everything," Mr. Meow said. "Just let me go, and let's eat this lobster. I didn't have any dinner last night." "I'll share," he said. Clive and Scratchy looked at each other and, in the spirit of quote-unquote old time's sake, let up on Meow. Well, friends, apparently they hadn't learned very well, and one trickster to another, of course you can guess what happened next. Clive and Scratchy were both pushed aside by Mr. Meow as he leaned into the lobster pate. He would make them wait while he ate. Sure, they could have some too, but when he finished, they were going to pay for their tricks. Mr. Meow would make sure of it. All right, friends. Thank you all for listening. We will be back next time with chapters 7, 8, and 9. Take care.